Welcome to the section on client-side exploitation. What we're going to be looking at here is pivoting away from actually server and services type exploits into actually the client, where this is going to look at things that are on specific machines. So let's go ahead and get started. In our first video, we're going to be looking at client-side exploitation types. There are many different types of exploits that you can include or leverage that are only on the client. And the reason is because clients have more applications installed on than servers typically do. So let's start to take a look. Over the years, there's been a very focus on the perimeter. Security professionals have constantly bolstered the perimeter by putting in firewalls, by putting in IDSs and other security control mechanisms to prevent actors and penetration testers from being able to come from the outside in through those devices and take advantage of the systems, usually the servers that are at that position. As that became harder and harder, the attackers began to look at other ways that they could get into the systems and found the soft spot was actually on client machines. More reasons was because client machines already have some inherent access rights. The login ID, the computer has already been registered against the network, such as an Active Directory. And then because of those type of things that are already available on the network, it seemed like a logical place to take advantage of those access rights and get into the system. So how did they accomplish that? By moving into the applications that existed on client-based machines, because services usually aren't available. Most machines do not run a web server or run email or any of that type of thing as a server service. Instead, they run applications that access those type of things or that access other types of attributes that are on the network. So what kind of exploits might we find out there? Well, we can find exploits that are developed based on, say, web activity. So if you are browsing to a specific web page, that you can exploit the browser itself. And those attacks can be very general. They can support different types of protocols such as WebDAV, or they might exploit plugins such as Java or Flash Player that are integrated into the browser to make them work more effectively across the network. But they can also attack the specific application itself, such as Internet Explorer versus Firefox or even Chrome. Each one of those is developed differently, and different vulnerabilities have shown up in each one of those. And those are one thing that we could take advantage of. Some other things that we might look at that are not browser-based would be things like the file format exploits. And what these are attacks that majorly take advantage of client install applications that aren't necessarily network-based. They just happen to be how a client or a person interacts with files that are on either the network or their system itself. Some common applications would be like Adobe Acrobat, which are PDF files, or the MS Office applications such as .doc and .xls. Well, technically, you can attack any application on a client-based machine as long as there's either a vulnerability or an ability to execute it with high enough privileges. That doesn't mean that you can take advantage of every application. It means specifically that they have to have that vulnerability and you have to have that particular application on the client-based machine, which can make it a little bit more tricky, but it is something that you can definitely leverage. Some other things that you might be able to do are what we call standalone attacks. And what these are is instead of actually trying to take advantage of a specific client-based application or a client-based behavior, what you're doing is you're actually rolling one of the Metasploit attacks into its own executable that you want the end user to be able to execute on their system. In this case, what we're doing is we're not taking advantage of any particular vulnerability except the vulnerability of the user themselves and getting them to actually execute it. Now, when we do this, what we do is we use another program called MS Venom in order to wrap that up into an executable, and then we just got to deliver it to the endpoint. Other things that we want to talk about includes delivering the exploits themselves. So you have this exploit, or you know that the client has a specific application that you can take advantage of. How are you going to get it to the victim? Well, there are several ways that you can actually accomplish this. The most common ones that are seen that pen testers and even nefarious actors use include email. They might use websites, which we sometimes call watering holes, or some other ways to lure them in. And there's some other staging types that we are going to talk about, but we'll get to those at the end of this particular section.